Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and I've got my co-host here, Aaron Beaner. Nothing special today because this is not a special day. Nintendo Directs, they happen all the time. What,
Course.
5 times a week, something like that.
Some, yeah.
So I'm not putting any special energy into this video. That's a joke. Just kidding. It's a Nintendo Direct discussion. We're going to be talking about the February 2023 Direct and the secrets held within. But if you want to talk to us about this Direct or any future Directs or any past Directs, if you're that kind of sick fucking bastard, join our Discord. The link is in the top description. And way down the subscribe channel, ring the bell, comment on the video, please. God, comment on our videos. Abram, you and I got to live react to the Direct last night. And I've since had a discussion with one Robert Talks Media on YouTube.
Yep.
But this is our first time talking about it since you left to listen to music or something. I don't know. It was a whole thing. But give me your opening thoughts, little man.
Yeah, I thought the Direct. I can't talk because I'm so excited. And I actually truly am. We were saying this as the Direct was actually happening. Mm-hmm. They made a Direct for me, right?
Yeah.
And so it's basically as simple as that. And frankly, I don't care to say a whole lot more right now because I know you disagree, and I'm frankly only interested to talk about that because I think that that's compelling.
Sure.
Because in doing so, we'll talk about all the things I'm excited for.
Of course.
But I tweeted that I didn't know if I came or had a heart attack for Metroid Prime. Shadow dropping. I think Pikmin 4.
What's the difference, really?
What's the difference? I think Pikmin 4 looks amazing. I'm so excited for GBA and Game Boy. Little updates to Mario Kart look excellent. Tears of the Kingdom continues to whelm me, but nonetheless, I'm very excited to play that at release, of course. So that they hit all the notes for me, and in addition, there was a wonderful selection of third-party software that I definitely want to get into, particularly from Level 5. Someone suggested on Twitter, maybe Nintendo's bought Level 5. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but they announced, three
games as far as I know,
three Switch exclusives of fairly high profile, so...
Mm-hmm. Well, for Level 5 games.
Sure.
Fairly high profile, yeah.
Yeah, sure. But I was quite pleased with it.
Yeah, you are right. They made a Direct for you. I think, unfortunately... Within doing that, they kind of made a Direct for, in my eyes, no one else, but also, I'm in the bubble of games Twitter where everyone's like, this is the greatest thing since fucking sliced bread. Yeah. I'm sitting there like, well, they didn't announce a new game. And for me, that is what I'm really hanging my hat on here, and it is what brings this Direct down from a consistent amount of games that I'm excited for them. I'm going to be playing a lot of these games. What the stuff they showed was good, but unfortunately, without a new game, and in my opinion, almost complete lack of surprises, this Direct, in retrospect, is incredibly lacking in a few areas. And I think predictability is that's the worst thing a Direct can be, in my eyes. Is Nintendo is great at being the kings of left field, about trying something, about bringing back a franchise, about doing something that you couldn't even fathom, reinventing a franchise. And this Direct, unironically and genuinely, me and Tim in our server predicted 90% of what Nintendo had to say in 5 minutes, being as safe as possible. So this Direct for me just felt safe. It felt by the numbers. It felt like coasting and not really doing anything interesting, which is kind of an inversion of what the Switch generation has been for me, is trying something new, going out of left field, completely reinventing whatever it is that needs to be invented, reviving a franchise that I'm like, I had no idea this was going to be coming back. Like Switch Sports last year, that wasn't a good game, but that was really interesting that they decided to bring that back. And the fact that they issued real forward-thinking surprises is what really disappoints me about this Direct. Again, what was there was good. It was fine. But in my opinion, it was kind of on par because it was exactly what I expected. And I don't want Nintendo to do what I expect because they're so good at doing the unexpected.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested to bore into this idea because the first thing we have to say just inherently is that I have said before, and I will continue to reiterate, that I don't care about the Direct as a piece of media that must stand alone as something with entertainment value.
Sure, of course. And I respect that. I disagree, but I respect it.
Yeah, because for me, the Nintendo Direct is about a couple things. Principally, it's about showing what I'm going to be playing on my Nintendo Switch. And so from that lens, to me, the Direct is a 40-minute advertisement.
Yeah, of course.
But, and while I say that very cynically, and while I do think that there are other modes of sharing this information, nonetheless, it's undeniable that there is a great amount of fun to be had in the communal conversation around a direct in terms of
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter all the time, so it's super fun seeing people freak out, give their predictions, give their
Hmm.
postmortems of a showcase and everything. But to me, the direct is a sort of it's a vehicle for all of that. It's a vehicle for seeing
Yeah.
what I'm going to play. It's a vehicle for having these conversations. It's really nothing more than that. So I
Hmm.
inherently, personally, have no real issue with being able to predict things that are in a direct, for instance, because
Hmm.
well, half of the fun, the military Nintendo Direct complex, half of it is predicting things, right?
Hmm.
So the ability
Sure.
to get predictions right, it's kind of fun. It's kind of neat through that lens. So I get what you're saying, and I feel like there's a larger conversation to be had in general about like Nintendo's need to surprise,
Yeah.
in part because you bring up like Nintendo Switch Sports, and if that's the bar for surprise, well, ultimately that game is like a sort of half-hearted revitalization of an idea that was already brought to its conclusion that
Hmm.
sold well but didn't review well, and that you don't play and I don't play, and
Yeah.
so at a certain point, I feel like something like that, it's whatever. I think that the success of this director was that everything here looks of very high quality.
Sure.
And I was shadow boxing with myself a little bit, as I tend to
Okay.
do in the car on the way to the concert last night. And I was explaining to Jean a little bit that this is. Can I have a tangent for a second?
You were already going on one, so let's do another
Right.
one.
I think part of the
Fractals.
I think part of
Just
the
splits
reason
and
that
splits and splits.
yes, I think part of the reason that I'm good at criticism is that I'm mentally ill. And this sounds weird, but follow me down the rabbit hole for a second. I have always lived with voices in my head saying like you suck and you're bad and you're doing things wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm constantly in conversation with something I don't agree with, right?
And voices on YouTube and in conversation
Right,
and all
and in
that
my
too.
personal life and
Yeah.
family and all that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I basically having a
The
conversation.
PA loudspeaker in your dorm.
So I was having a conversation in my head with the wolf inside my brain. I said the direct sucked, right, which I didn't agree
Yeah.
with, but exists there.
Name
Anyway.
is Tucker.
Yes, and I'm this idea that there were no quote unquote new games,
Hmm.
because so much of it is rehash. I don't want to say rehashed. It's revitalized content. It's Advance Wars. It's Metroid Prime. It's all these things. It's
Yeah.
Kirby. I'm curious. Let me just throw it over before I give my thesis on that. What do you think about that point? About the amount of software that the first half of the game in particular is hinging on that is not new. What do you think about that?
That is part of the problem.
Sure.
But I think it being basically all that was there outside of the two main titles that
Yep.
they opened and closed the direct with, which we thought that we were going to see, and we saw, and they delivered what we expected. The rest of it in the middle was either DLC or it was revitalized content.
Yep.
Revitalized content, as you were saying. And I think the reason that frustrates me is because it's a lack of balance in my eyes. I think that what the Switch
Yeah.
has been so good at doing for the majority of its life cycle is balancing, here's the new stuff, here's the forward-thinking stuff, and we're also bringing back the new things.
Sure.
We're also announcing that we're doing a port, we're adding games to NSO, whatever. I do think that each direct in itself is a microcosm of what is the direction of the Switch going to be. And when, in my eyes, this direct skews so heavily in reflective content, looking back, bringing back old games, adding DLC to games that have already released, giving us trailers for games that are, yes, very excited. I can't wait to play both Pikmin 4, Tears of the Kingdom. Even if I'm criticizing this direct, it doesn't mean there's not plenty of games in here that I'm very excited to play. I think that the balance is off.
Sure.
And the new announcements being old games is what worries me a little bit for the future and health of the ecosystem, because I don't want this the Switch to peter off like the 3DS did and have like some weird ports and some games that are like old content that no one really cares about. And unfortunately, I wonder if that's what the Switch is going to have as they work to transition to that next generation. A year and a half maybe after Zelda, that is mostly this old stuff. It's Prime ports and it's remakes of whatever, and we're going to be adding DLC, but it's kind of just going to slow down. And the reason that frustrates me is not that I'm not going to be playing those old games, not that I'm not going to be enjoying those old games, but what Nintendo has done so well with this generation is keep that balance of having ports of older games, bringing games to NSO, but still having that Switch identity, which is the new games. And that's what they've been leaning on for the majority of every year of the Switch, and this year seems like it's leaning a little bit in the other direction, and that's a little bit worrisome in my eyes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and so there's a couple of points I think that are important there. The
Yeah.
first for me is the idea that, to me, last night was a really excellent illustration of the fact that Nintendo is leveraging their greatest strength, which is their vault of past titles,
Mm-hmm.
at different scales.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, first off, obviously we had the NSO drops, which are very exciting. We just got 15
Yeah,
new
of
games
course.
added to NSO across 2 libraries, which, given the very blatant omissions to both, are, I assume, going to be fairly frequently updated with new pieces of software now.
We can certainly hope.
Yeah.
Though that's not indicated by the expanded lineups that they showed. Where's
Yeah.
Donkey Kong 94? Where's Super Mario Land? That was a launch game for the Game Boy. What are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah, we'll see. But the point being, even if it's drip fed like N64, those came at a cadence at least. The point is,
Yeah.
we've got a starting point now. But what we
Of
have
course.
is, at the cost of a subscription service, you have access to 2 more libraries of titles now. The inception
Absolutely.
of them. But then you have Metroid
That's
Prime.
one of my favorite parts of the Direct.
Yeah, but then you have Metroid Prime, which is, I think, surprisingly but importantly, treated with very little fanfare. Because part of my issue, especially in the early days of Switch, is that we would do something like the showcase that revealed Hyrule Warriors and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze for Switch.
Yeah, early 2018.
And they were like, and 2 of our big games are these 2 titles that just came out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas they said,
big games.
Yeah. Whereas they said here, hey, we're bringing Metroid Prime back. It's going to look beautiful, but we're going to release it not only right now, but we're going to release it at $39.99.
Yes.
And then you have Advance Wars, which is very much the sort of Master Chief Collection, Mass Effect Trilogy, Crash Trilogy, Monkey Ball, Banana Mania route of remake collection, then at $60. And we saw, of course, Zelda going up to $70, but $70 being a sort of a scaling price point depending on the title, not a benchmark. So basically what I'm saying is we've got these different scales that Nintendo's exploring the back catalog in.
Yeah.
And we've got Kirby, too, which is getting some new content. I think what's important about these titles, not only are they at, I think, appropriate price points, but they're not impeding the potential for new titles in those franchises. Because you think about, like, 2017, Mario Kart, for as much as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has become this sprawling and important title, and that Yoshi's Island track looks fantastic.
We can talk about that, yeah.
There's no doubt that the existence of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe meant that Mario Kart 9 didn't have to happen.
True.
However, we just got Metroid Dread. We are getting Metroid Prime 4. So this...
Well, just got.
Right, but games...
A year and a half ago.
Yeah, but games don't grow on trees, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't have possibly made a new Metroid game in 18 months unless they were just going to flip the assets, right?
Yeah. Well, also, it was a different team.
Yeah, but I'm talking about franchise scale, right? The existence of Metroid Prime Remaster doesn't mean that Metroid isn't moving forward, because in the context of generation, we quote-unquote just got Dread. We are getting Prime 4. Kirby just got, and I think we can use just more directly here, just got 2 new games and is now getting this. Advance Wars, as I said, is the sort of playbook that the wider industry is following of bringing back some franchises akin to a Crash or a Spyro or things. So I think that's very successful, the way that they're treating legacy content this year.
Yeah.
In my opinion, maybe even more successful than have done it in some past years of Switch.
Yeah, no, I actually do agree with that. And I think, on the whole, what they have done with their older content here absolutely is the right call, is making some remasters, making some full releases, shadow dropping some, putting them on digital. It's a sliding scale, as you said, and I think that absolutely works for different titles. And that is a strength of what Nintendo knows, that they can capitalize on nostalgia, because that's what they're doing, and eke the money out of our pockets, because that's what they're doing. But cynically, of course. But
they're
successfully giving us games that we have wanted for a long time. I've never played through Metroid Prime, and of course, I'm going to play it with completely redone visuals and dual analog stick control. I'm very excited to play the game. Absolutely, 100%. And same with having access to. Well, I played most of Minish Caps. I'm probably not gonna play that again. But Superstar Saga and Wario Land 3, and I'm gonna be playing these games on here. That is not my issue, and I think you're right that they're doing it better than they have, because
Yeah.
not saying Metroid Prime Remake is one of our 4 core titles this year,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, really? No, it's a shadow drop. It's in between bigger games, being Fire Emblem and Kirby. The physical release is coming a little bit later. That's something that they don't usually, I don't know if they've actually ever done. But I like that, absolutely. But I do think that when this direct is so focused on that and not giving us any hints of what the new moving forward future is, that's where I start to be a little hesitant. Again, it's the balance. I think you're right. The balance of what they're doing with old content is better than it maybe ever has been before. But I think that they're, in my eyes, for a Nintendo Direct to be healthy and indicate a healthy support for the ecosystem going forward, there needs to be some of both. It needs to be have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Or, no, have your cake and eat your vegetable.
No, I know exactly what you mean, and that's sort of like one prong of where I think the direct was successful.
Yeah,
I want to talk about the two. I think we should talk in a little bit more depth, actually, both about Pikmin 4 and Tears Kingdom. But I actually want to first talk about DLC, if that's all right with you.
Okay, sure.
And
another one of my complaints about the direct. It makes sense, but it also just feels like coasting. Yeah.
See, I this is where I disagree in part, because you are Mr. Don't really play DLC. I am Mr. It's gonna take. I'll check it out, but it's gonna take a village to really get me to delve into it completely. Breath of the Wild DLC is a good example. I did play it and I had fun with it, but I did not complete any of those things. For instance, but I think it's important to remember that Nintendo, and this is going to be a point that I hammer on in a different way when we get to the new games. But Nintendo's software operates in the marketplace very different than a lot of other companies' software does.
Sure.
And we see this every time there's a new financial report that comes out. Nintendo's titles are not front-loaded in their sales the way that a lot of games across the industry are.
Of course, absolutely.
They continue to sell at a cadence that other companies would kill for months after release.
Yeah,
so
years after release.
Yeah.
Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold like 7 million copies last month. I was like, is that even possible? Are they allowed to do that?
Yeah, and so my point there is that Nintendo's titles are evergreen in a way that almost makes them single player otherwise a game as a service in a respect, because there are always new players being introduced to these titles because they're always buying them, because that's the nature of how Nintendo releases software and how the software sells. So I actually think that it's one of their great strengths that they are continuing to double down on DLC to give these games that have long tails more things to do in them, because at a certain point we do have to step out of our perspective on DLC to understand that when that Xenoblade Chronicles story expansion drops, for most people that is a year defining moment for Xenoblade fans.
Absolutely.
And that side order Splatoon DLC, while I still have no fucking clue what the Inkopolis thing is, and frankly I don't even really care to discuss it. So
weird. When Fred Crumbs, at least,
Fred Crumbs, love me Fred Crumbs. But when that single player expansion releases, me and all these other people in the Splatoon community who are even more ingrained than I am will be stopping whatever quote unquote new releases are out to play side order.
Of course.
So I think it's important to remember that yes, Splatoon is out, Xenoblade is out, Fire Emblem is out, Mario Kart is out, but they are not gone. These games exist in the ecosystem in perpetuity. So I think it's quite successful to have those teams elongate those life cycles with these expansions that do look to be of high quality and creative interest. So I was actually quite impressed with all the DLC we saw today.
The reason I'm with you, that is a good thing that they're doing this. It's exciting for fans of this franchise, and I'm fans of this franchise. I just happen to be a different kind of fan that doesn't return to those games like probably Nintendo wants me to. Like most game creators want me to for their games nowadays. I'm sorry, not that life. But I do think that for me, the reason on a very subjective level, these DLC drops, while they, yes, you're right, they look quality, they're for these big games, they're extending their life cycles. I think that they also felt very predictable. It's like, yes, we're gonna get a Torna version for Xenoblade. We're gonna get more emblems for Fire Emblem. We're gonna get a new wave of DLC for Mario Kart. And unfortunately, that is what, maybe it's because we've gotten such a healthy life cycle of DLC for the Switch, but it's starting to feel less interesting. It's starting to feel less fresh and new. But now that we've reached 6 years of having DLC be a solid, if not major part of each direct, it was really fresh. It was really exciting. It was really interesting to see Octo expansions. Like, whoa, what the heck is this? You're playing as Octolings? There's going to be a story expansion? That's crazy. Whoa, wait, Torna? They can do that. They can just like make another 20-hour JRPG and just put it out. Even with the Mario Karts, like wait, they're adding DLC to a port of a game. These things were making DLC fresh and interesting and acted as surprising forward-thinking moments for a direct. Even if they were DLC, they were things that Nintendo hadn't done before. But each of the things that they had here were just continuations of that. And now I'm not saying that that is inherently a bad thing. All of these things do look quality. They will extend the life cycles of these each of these games, but I do think there is a difference in the forward-looking, fresh intrigue of what DLC has been in part, but I would say not in most part, but in part for past directs of it having an edge of, oh, this is new. I'm interested to see what Nintendo does for their spin on DLC, as opposed to now, which again, and I think that this is probably what really tempers my expectations for this direct, is I was able to accurately say this is exactly what each of these things is going to be and not be surprised in the slightest when they're like, we're doing another Mario Kart wave, we're doing more emblems for Fire Emblem, we're doing a story expansion and one other character for Xenoblade. These are predictable. Frankly, they're safe and they continue the track just on par and not tipping upward to be something fresh, innovative, and forward-looking.
I guess I'm just sort of confused about.
But also, I'm not going to play. I didn't play those.
Right.
I'm not going to play these. So for me, it doesn't matter on a very subjective level. But I do think there is a difference that is recognizable in terms of quality or excitement.
But not quality. There's no doubt that.
Sorry, no, that was a faux pas.
And that's kind of my point. And we'll get into this, but I'm old enough to remember a time. I love that phrase. I love using that phrase for things that happened really recently. I think it's funny.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember a time when Nintendo had a direct in 2015, and I want to talk more about this direct. I think it's an interesting point of comparison soon. But
okay,
I also remember a time when every game they announced for Metroid and Zelda and Animal Crossing were different. And nobody liked them. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about downloadable content, we're talking about expanding upon an experience that people already love.
Of course, yeah.
What people want out of Xenoblade is they want a new story expansion. So that's what Monolith made, and they're an incredibly talented developer, so it's going to be very high quality. Mm-hmm. What people want out of Splatoon is the two-pronged thing of what they're offering, which is let's have more to the multiplayer, but then let's also have a new story expansion. So that's what they're offering. And the motif of that story expansion is completely different than anything we've seen from the past. And the motif of the Xenoblade game is a sort of fan servicey. Let's bring back these characters you love for this new narrative.
Yeah, of course.
They're speaking to their communities in the ways they want to be spoken to.
Yeah,
and so I don't think that there's let's get PETA mad at us. There's only so many ways to skin a cat, right? At a certain point.
I thought you were trying to make a Family Guy joke.
No,
like, let's get PETA mad at us.
No, it's like,
oh god,
what was Nintendo supposed to do, if not that, right? I think they're offering what the communities want, and if anything, there's a long period of time where Nintendo was doing anything but that. It was the Uno, give the community what they're after, or draw 25, and Nintendo had 450 Uno cards.
Yeah.
Right? And again, I just think that we need to look for this evolution in the right places, and I don't think that a DLC expansion for Xenoblade, which is what we expected, but also what we wanted, is like a necessary place to criticize. I don't think.
Sure. No. Yeah. I again, I'm not saying any of these DLCs will be bad. They please the communities. I just think there's a pretty marked conceptual difference between being able to predict each of the DLCs very accurately and have them just coast along on what we expected versus what I did think I proved pretty concrete evidence of with DLC was Nintendo innovative in the past. Of it being Mario Kart 8 DLC and that's a thing, you're allowed to do that. That is DLC used in Nintendo's creative and forward-thinking way of doing something different from what the rest of the industry is. And even if I'm not a Mario Kart person, I'm watching a direct Mario Kart DLC is revealed. If it's Mario Kart DLC for a Mario Kart game that came out a year ago, okay, that's that's coasting and that's doing what you expect. But if it's Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is getting like 50 tracks, that is Nintendo's version of a spin on what can DLC be? How can we reinvent this? How can we give something to our audience that they do want but they're not expecting? And I think what they did here was what they wanted, but also what we expected. And there is a difference between how much I think I enjoy Nintendo trying something new, whether it hits or not. I think that innovating and trying to reinvent what the concept of DLC is, that is what they've been so good at in the era of Switch games. But the DLC is frankly not even my. It feels like it was the majority of what this direct was, but it isn't where my real criticism of the direct comes in, which again, as I said, was the fact that there was no new games.
Okay, yeah, let's just move on from DLC point. It's small potatoes. Let's talk about the new games.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what's interesting to me about this.
Pikmin and Tears of the Kingdom?
What?
Pikmin and Tears of the Kingdom?
Yeah. Here's what's interesting. Okay. That's what I want to talk about now. We are... I just don't understand really what we are looking for other than this. And I don't mean about projecting into the end of the year, which we'll talk about separately.
Yeah.
But we are only 2.5 months away from Zelda now. And we have games. We have more than enough games in that run up between there.
Of course.
And
absolutely.
then Zelda needs its window, and then we're going to very quickly be into Pikmin, and there's third-party titles that are releasing in that gap afterwards.
Yep. And Advance Wars.
And Advance Wars. Well, Advance Wars is pre Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh,
yeah, it's April. It is? April 20.
Oh, April and May. My bad. Yes, you're right. My bad.
Which looks great, by the way. I mean, it looks as good as it did last time because the game has been done for 2 years.
It's exact same. Yeah.
But can't wait for it regardless. But when you talk about wanting Nintendo to look forward and push things forward, I think we need to keep a couple things in mind. Mm-hmm. First off, in under a month's time, we're going to be 7 years into Switch.
No, 6.
Or sorry, you're right. Sorry, I miscounted.
Yeah. It's okay.
I'm not very good with numbers. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah.
We're however numbers of years removed from 2017 we are. Okay, that's how number.
That's usually how much we are. Yeah.
And we have at this point reinvented the wheel or iterated upon the wheel for basically every franchise we want, with the exceptions of F-Zero, Donkey Kong, something like Star Fox, I suppose, and like Punch-Out. Like I can make a list, but the Nintendo series we wanted to grow and improve have. And we're into the period of time, like the 3DS is quite a salient example, and I think the Switch is tracking the direction of 3DS in a lot of different ways, where we've gotten the franchises, we got the runner show,
absolutely,
we're into the sequels. And I think, to your point, part of the reason why maybe you're not as excited conceptually by the idea of a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 story expansion is because we already got Xenoblade Chronicles 2 on the system. We're into the sequels.
And Torna, and Definitive Edition, and 3, and now this. Yeah, of course.
We're into that second wind.
True, absolutely.
And so, but nonetheless, even in the second wind, we're still getting Pikmin's revitalization and what was today ostensibly its official reveal. Now, I get that we know that Pikmin 4 existed, but that's what we knew, and we knew that before that showcase. What we know now is what Pikmin 4 is, and it looks beautiful, and it looks bold, and there's new traversal options, and new movement, and new characters, and Pikmin types, and mechanics, and worlds to explore. It looks beautiful. It is, to your point, what the Switch era was.
Yeah,
and
still is,
but especially was when that system was a little bit newer and there were more franchises to go.
Sure, yeah.
You look at 2022, we loved it, but really Kirby, and you might be able to pull another one that's escaping my head, maybe Bayonetta.
A couple Pokemon games, maybe.
Sure, but I'm talking about from within first. I'm talking specifically within first party.
Sure, okay.
We got Kirby that was brand new, but then we're into sequels and things, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the same tenor. I think.
Well, there's definitely some differences.
There's some differences, sure, but we're talking again. We're only playing with half of a deck of a year right now.
Yeah.
But what Forgotten Land was, what Metroid Dread was, what all these, what Animal Crossing was, what Odyssey was, what all these things were, is what Pikmin 4 is.
Yeah.
And sitting
Yeah, absolutely.
and sitting next to it is, from a sort of macro perspective in Tears of the Kingdom, the most important game that will be on Switch for
This year, yeah.
for
Yeah.
the I'm talking about the whole generation, to
Mm,
the wide industry, because there are
sure.
plenty of people who played Breath of the Wild and didn't play anything else on Switch.
Yeah, of course.
Nintendo secured their financial year, they secured their awards year, and everything in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think it's unreasonable in this second wind of Switch, when it
Mm,
is, I think, after this direct, especially clear that teams are probably pivoting towards a new piece of hardware for 2024 or
yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
that
Being
we're
talked
going to
about, yeah.
get the same amount of innovative, forward thinking, let's reinvent the franchise titles in
Yeah.
2023, especially when the ones that we have are scant but are so important and look like they're either going to be incredibly successful in Tears of the Kingdom, or be incredibly forward thinking and exciting in Pikmin 4. I just think that contextualizing where we are in the ecosystem, what we're getting
Yeah.
here makes a lot of sense and looks brilliant.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think cynically and truthfully for where my own heart sits, it's a little bit unfortunate to see the Switch come to an end relatively abruptly, I would say. And of course, you're right. Playing with only half a deck, there absolutely
Yeah.
could, and I think should be some a pretty hearty middle of the year direct that clarifies what the rest of the year is. We've still got Pokemon Company to announce whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
If that's going to be a new game or DLC or whatever, we'll see. But I think that I just frankly, because you and I have had these conversations so frequently of the Switch has 3 more years in it. That's going to be their main console for an even longer amount of time. Why would they put out another console? I wasn't expecting there to be this comparison to the late stage 3DS. That was an era that people don't really talk about because it wasn't. It was fine, but it was resting on their laurels. It was coasting. It was preparing for that next generation. Of course, that absolutely paid off for them, and I hope this pays off for them too. And I think this is a better place to be in than end of life cycle 3DS. But it is a tonal shift that I frankly wasn't really expecting, because what the Switch has been so good at, and each direct over the Switch's life cycle has been so good at, is what's coming in 2 weeks. We're going to do a trailer for that. What's coming in a couple months. We're going to do a trailer for that. We're going to reveal something that's coming in that 2 to 3 4 month cycle. That's going to be entirely fresh in whatever this direct is. And we're going to give you a tease of what's coming in the future. And they were lacking half of that. They were doing just the short term. And that is totally fine. Again, that is what they said in the direct description.
They
but
always
also,
lie.
they've lied about that literally every time.
They lie every
And I had no expectation that this one would be different, that we would not get a announcement that there's going to be a Yoshi game or a DK game or another game from one of these franchises that is, again, a new announcement. There were no even middle tier new announcements, like something like Mario Strikers Battle League, Fire Emblem Three Hopes, and Nintendo Switch Sports were all revealed in one direct last year, and none of those are Set the World on Fire or complete franchise reinventions, but they were all surprises. Even if they weren't games that set the world on fire, they were something that direct had to push the console forward and say, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. You and I were shocked when they brought back the sports sub-series on Switch. Wasn't a great game, but that was a surprise that happened. Mario Strikers had been dead for most of our lifetimes at that point, and they brought it back. Well, it wasn't that good, but that's okay. That means that direct is still forward thinking, is bringing back something. And even with Three Hopes, it's like, hold on, they're doing a Fire Emblem Warriors sequel that is in the world of Three Houses. This is something new for not only Muso, but for what Warriors can be in terms of Nintendo continuing the story, all that. These smaller things are what I expected or hoped for. I'm not wanting them to do an Odyssey 2 here. I'm not wanting them to do Mario Kart 9 here. But those B tier releases, whether it's Donkey Kong, whether it's Rhythm Heaven, whether it's bringing back another Mario Baseball, those are things that aren't set the world on fire. Oh my god, this is what they're going to be hanging their hat on for this entire year. But it is something that adds a fresh spark for what this direct is. And unfortunately, it was completely lacking on those. The only new announcements from Nintendo were Metroid Prime and the NSO things, which are both great. I'm very excited for both of them, but they are reflective content. They aren't new stuff. They are also in the moment, so it doesn't add any longevity or like future projection for the system because they're out now, which is great. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But I do think that the balance, again, is what's very important. They do have games. I absolutely believe that there will be plenty of probably very good games, solid games, even if they are those B tier importance-wise releases coming out in that second half of the year. But why would you not reveal just one of those? Give this direct one new game to hang its hat on, and that completely changes the tenor of no new releases whatsoever. And I think also the problem is contextualizing this within the announcement cycle of an entire year. This makes everything, literally everything, hang on that second direct. Outside of Pokemon, because I assume that they'll announce something on their own in a few weeks or
probably pretty
whatever.
soon.
But that June, that July direct needs to announce everything for the rest of the year. Maybe something into the next half of the year. Are we going to be like on our tiptoes, like waiting, like, oh god, are we going to trip and not have anything? That the balance, I think, again, as I've been saying this whole conversation, is off. And I think what they've been so good at is giving us those teases, whether it's just a logo or a small trailer or whatever, in directs, so we know what's coming for the next direct, even if it's not a full reveal. But then it's a balance between, okay, we're getting information on new games, and here's what's going in the future. It's that cadence that I think is so important to keeping the ecosystem healthy. Is here's the new stuff, okay, and then we're going over to the next one, and here's some new stuff, finishing off what we announced last time. Here's the new stuff, finishing off what we left last time, and continuing that cycle. But it is something that has helped them be so forward thinking and in the moment important at once.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think I think that Nintendo, well, obviously is not interested in that, and we'll have to just discern why when it comes
Yeah.
to be June or July or whatever time of someone decide to have their next direct. But and I said this on Twitter, but we got to remember that we got Mario Party Superstars, Metroid Dread, and
Yeah.
WarioWare. We got their entire fall slate in one direct, and that was
Sure.
easy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the reason I said I want to talk about the 2015 direct earlier is that to me that was really the beginning of an inflection point for Nintendo when they were starting to talk about games far closer to release. I was talking to somebody else about this recently, but they announced their holiday slate for 2015 all in June. Now that was tricky because those games ended up not being very good. But I think they began to tease this idea on sort of a company-wide level of maybe this is the way we need to release our games moving forward. Because I think that, and this is conjecture, but I don't think that they are happy with what happened with Tears of the Kingdom.
I agree.
And
yes.
I don't think I'm really making.
Frankly, I don't think anyone is.
Yeah,
to be honest,
I don't think I'm making far leap of logic there, but I really think that Nintendo, especially not only that, but Metroid Prime 4, but both to a similar degree, I think they embarrassed themselves.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I'm not even saying like Nintendo Nintendo should be embarrassed by delaying those games. What I mean is they got directors of these games to stand in front of a plain wall and say, in the case of Metroid Prime 4, with its own separate YouTube video, we're sorry, we're scrapping the game and starting again.
Yeah.
And I think that since 2015, because Breath of the Wild had a similarly tumultuous release cycle as Kingdom did, that they're like, look, this doesn't make sense for us. Yeah. And then especially in Metroid Prime 4, they said, we have egg on our face. We had to come out and make like a YouTuber apology video.
Yeah. We had to make the equivalent of like a white font on black text in a picture box on Twitter. Yeah.
And so I get what you're saying, that we need those things to look forward to, but we've been quote unquote looking forward to Metroid Prime 4 and I've got this number right for sure, the last 4 years.
Yeah. Sure.
And then it has meant nothing.
Yeah. Well, 4.5.
When Nintendo showed Dread.
No, wait, that was revealed at E3 2017.
Right, you're sorry. I'm sorry.
So it's been 5.5 years.
Yeah, I was thinking about they announced
when they restarted it. Yeah. You're right. That's true.
That's an even more salient point.
Yeah.
We've been sitting with this empty promise of Metroid Prime 4 for almost as long as the Switch has been around.
Exactly, yes.
But when they said Metroid Dread is coming out
they just put it out, yeah.
In 4 months, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Don't question the numbers again. It was concrete, it was real, and that game sold exceptionally well, and it was an exceptional piece of software, and the marketing was truncated, and we didn't know it was coming till it came, but the sales weren't hurt. The game was not... They weren't hiding the game. The game was exceptional. Nintendo is getting comfortable now with every game they release of any scale being ready to drop anywhere from 45 minutes after it's showcased to 6 months' time.
Yeah.
I get that we don't have those pillars to look forward to, but those pillars for so many years meant nothing.
Yeah.
Bayonetta 3 meant nothing for many years. It
True.
was
True.
TBC on the calendar every financial quarter. Metroid Prime 4 is TBC on the calendar. The sequel
Mhm.
to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was something we talked about for years.
Yes.
Nintendo is in a position where they don't need to do that. And so I
Yeah.
get what you're saying. And at a certain point, we are both speculating. You are glass half empty on this point. I'm glass half full. But I
Hmm.
just do not see a future where that glass doesn't have games in it. June is going to come around and there are going to be announcements because we have spent the better part of the last decade or more of Nintendo as a company's life being we're going to start shortening these cycles.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be a reflection of sales, it's not going to be a reflection of quality, it's going to be a reflection of we are going to talk about our games when they are done and they are ready.
Yeah.
And so I just don't. I think your criticism is a fair one, but all I'm saying is I don't share it because I think for as much evidence as you have, I have an equal amount of evidence for how Nintendo
Mm.
is talking about their games just totally differently now.
Sure. Um, I think that's true, but I also think it's discounting the most of the Switch's life cycle, which has been a very solid balance between Smash Ultimate being announced 9 months before that comes out, and of course Pokemon Company is different, but Pokemon
Yeah,
Company announcing their games 9 months before they come out, there's plenty of games that are announced in that February March slot and don't come out until fall. And so that's
that's fair.
8 months, which I think is a solid like middle ground
Yeah,
between not fucking up like Metroid Prime or Zelda versus Metroid Prime being announced and revealed. I don't know. Of course, this is also conjecture. I don't know that. I think that game probably would have done a little, or will do a little better. Will done a little better if a future, past, whatever tense, if it had been announced and had a slightly larger release cycle.
sorry,
If it
which
had
game are you
some
talking
marketing.
about?
Prime remake.
It's
Prime
already
remake.
number one on eShop. I'll just note that. But
No,
yeah,
yeah, I don't doubt that
yeah,
because it's shadow dropped. But I do think that marketing is important, and shadow dropping something is exciting. But I'm not sure is healthy for the future of the ecosystem. You do want to have marketing things. You want to have trailers out there. You want to say this is what's coming. And of course, it's a different case because it's a remaster of an old game and all that. But I do think that having a balance between this is coming in 2 months,
yeah,
which is a great way for something to be announced. 100%. I like when that happened.
yeah,
And then we also have things coming in 6 months. We also have things coming in 8 months. And then again, that time scale shifts every time. It resets every time we have a
yeah,
direct. Give us something for what's coming out right away. Give us something coming out in a few months. Give us something that's slightly on the horizon. And that keeps us in a loop where there aren't really question marks. Again, you can criticize 2020 and early 2021, but obviously I think that's a little bit different for a multitude of reasons. But where every era of and every set of months of the Switch's life cycle, you have what's imminent, what's coming down the road, and what's even farther than that. And I do think that to me communicates a very healthy and long-standing ecosystem. And unfortunately, that has just been basically cut in half, which I
yeah,
think is not 100% a problem. It could be rectified easily with a direct in a few months. But I do think that it is a problem when you compare it to what they have been doing for the last few months. Yes, they have been shifting some of their games towards shorter, truncated announcements and releases, but that's not true across the board. They have had a balance. And again, that balance is what's really important to me. It's a delicate balance. And sometimes they mess it up. Sometimes they go a little
yeah,
too far. Sometimes they announce something too far in advance. Sometimes they shadow drop something. But I do think that the middle ground is where things sell their best, where the community is most excited about things, and where that harmony is met in the middle. And unfortunately, they tipped the scale pretty much all to one side here, which I think is what is causing such a guttural reaction to me. Again, this direct was good. Abram, I got a new Layton game announced.
yeah,
Although that's a unicorn pie in the sky thing that could come in 3 or 4 years. Who the hell knows? We love Katamari. I'm not saying there weren't games in here that
yeah,
excited me personally. I popped for a number of them, but I do think that the balance between third-party games, between games coming in the future, between what we know, between DLC, between something new, that is something that most directs, even if they aren't something personally exciting to me, have done really well in the past. And they blatantly did not put focus on some of the areas of that. And I think that is something that should be critiqued because that's what's kept the Switch's ecosystem so healthy for the entirety of its run of its life cycle.
yeah. You make a very fair point. I just think it's also important to remember that I'm not sure your point about needing those longer marketing cycles is true, considering Super
Hmm.
Mario 3D All Stars Collection,
Yeah.
which had 2 week gap, which might as well be a 1 day gap at a certain point, sold 8 million copies, right?
Of course.
And in the case of Smash Brothers, I think it's important to remember that yes, Smash Brothers had that longer time; it had 9 months. But for one thing, there was a good period of time until June where we didn't know if it was a port or not, and I wouldn't necessarily say that inspired great confidence necessarily.
Sure. Yeah, that's true.
And so ostensibly, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as we knew it was revealed in June, and then released in December, and it sold huge. And again, we have to remember that Nintendo's games sell and continue to sell. I just think that we need to be more adaptive to a different strategy from Nintendo. I mean, you even think about Super Mario Odyssey was 10 months, but that was also there's a marked difference between being in year 6 of your console's life, or year 1,
where you're the third selling greatest console of all time,
right? When you need to say, look, we are new, and we need to show people we need to show people commitment, and we need to do this. But they've established all of that, and now what they're establishing is this new trend where the games we want exist, and they're probably done, and they're going to be announced when they're ready.
It's true. It's a great point.
And at a certain point, I think we just view the situation differently. I think just the last thing of note is it's important to remember that there's also a significant amount of exciting third-party software in this Direct. And
there's a significant amount of third-party content.
Well, sure, but
I would personally push back on the exciting. Not that it isn't exciting for someone, but almost all of it was niche. There was no big third-party game that they're going to be really pushing along, that's going to push hardware, that's going to carry things forward. It was remakes, it was JRPGs, it was a Don't Nod game, Layton, a remake of Katamari. These aren't the big things that are holy shit, I can't believe that's coming to Switch.
Well, I mean, I think at a certain point, if we're going to get excited about some of these small Nintendo announcements, we must also get excited about what appears to be an exclusive new Samba de Amigo game. That's a major revitalization for Sega that people are quite excited about. You have to keep in mind that Level 5 in large part was critical to keeping the library of exclusives on DS and 3DS whole, and Level 5 has been gone for a long time. And they came back with a new IP in Deca Police, which looks quite interesting. They came back with Layton, which people have been wanting for so long. Fantasy Life, which you don't believe that I love. It was a very important game of 3DS. These games are going to be enormous in Japan in particular.
Sure.
But even still, when you look back on DS and 3DS, these are IP that are deeply important to those exclusive libraries. So I don't think we can undersell those necessarily. And then things like Ghost Trick is a very niche game, but that's
a crazy fucking thing. That's one of the most exciting announcements of the Direct. Yeah.
And it's a super exciting moment. Same with We Love Katamari.
Yeah.
The third-party titles was very Japanese focused, but excitingly, it wasn't solely Japanese focused in the way that we get in previous years and here's a million JRPG ports and things that look similar. Ghost Trick is a port, but we got 3 new games from Level 5, which is very exciting. And Sama de Amigo is a new Sega exclusive for the system. So I just think it's important to contextualize those as being nice parts of the Direct also.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say? What are you excited for the next Direct?
I'm excited for to learn what the fall games are.
So am I. But hey, I know everything I've said here is an incredibly unpopular opinion. People are losing their fucking minds about Metroid, about that you can play fucking Minish Cap on your Switch now. And guess what? I lost my mind a good amount of those as well. But I do think that I come at it from a little more critical analysis level when I'm thinking about what has made the Switch so successful. And I do think they made some changes here that, in my eyes, do deserve some criticism, and those can easily be rectified. But in the moment, I think there were problems. I think there were good things. But that's the balance that we need to strike. If you disagree with me, feel free to hopefully respectfully argue a little bit with me in the comments, or join the Discord and argue with me respectfully in there. But Abram, anything else?
Yeah, great discussion.